Hey guys, this time I want to talk about something that's going to have a little bit more application if you're writing military or military sci-fi rather than certain other genres. But it's a trope that tends to come up in the real world that we think is real and we probably should rethink it a little bit. It's the idea that conflict, particularly wars, drives technology. Now, whenever anybody tries to push this concept, this idea, in fact, it's been pushed so often that it's almost taken as gospel. Particularly in fiction, you see it constantly in military science fiction, and even in my own Odyssey 1 book, I definitely refer to it. It's one of the driving factors behind why the humans are more adaptive, and their technology, even though is lesser than the others, the humans from Earth are a conflict-driven species rather than a peaceful species. Therefore, their technology is advancing faster than the Empire or the Primini. The problem is that this is very much a mythical trope. It's got just enough truth in it that you kind of want to believe it because it justifies a whole lot of things that we kind of don't necessarily like about the way the world is. But if you actually examine it and think about it critically, it starts to fall apart. If this trope were true, if conflict drives innovation, well, the most advanced place on the planet would be the Middle East. It's not, in case you hadn't figured it out. But as with many of these tropes, as with a lot of tropes in fiction and in the real world, there's a little bit of truth there, and it's important to understand where the truth is and where the limitations are when you're building your universe. Okay? Conflict and competition definitely can drive innovation. World War II is the prime example of this. However, it requires more than just conflict. It requires very much competition. It requires the idea that you are dealing with near equals. You're not going to see innovation between where the United States is invading Iraq. There's not going to be big innovation there on either side because one side's just getting overwhelmed and the other side, there's no reason for them to innovate. What they have works fine. You've got to have near equals. You've got to have a situation where innovation can make a huge difference, in other words. The other thing is that you can't have it stretch on for very long. If you've got a centuries-long war, that is not going to drive innovation. If you've got wars that have been lasting that long, that's actually going to drag your cultures backwards because resources are going to become tapped out. In World War II, we actually saw that in like less than 5 years. As Nazi Germany pushed innovation to begin with, developing rockets, developing basically all kinds of tech that went on to build the world as we know it today. Towards the end of the war, they had to cut back. They didn't have the resources to build even some of the more advanced tech that they'd been building just a year earlier. They were running out of resources to build it. And that's only in a war that lasted 4 or 5 years. Now granted, if you are writing a star-spanning empire, that type of epic fiction, they're going to have more resources available to them. But at the same time, their wars are going to cost more resources. So there's a finite limit to how long you can keep up that kind of enhanced competitive innovation. And when you're writing your stories, keep that in mind because if you're writing cultures that have been at war for a century, which is a common thing in this type of genre, that is going to drag them back. It's not going to push them forward. Okay? Even 10 years is probably too much. They're going to start slipping back at the end of at the end of a decade, because wars scale up exponentially. They cost more and more and more. And when you're talking about galaxy-spanning wars, or galaxy spanning, sure, but stellar spanning, spanning star systems, the cost is going to be exponentially more than fighting across continents. So it doesn't matter how big your empire is. In fact, the bigger your empire is, the more those resources are going to be drawn into these wars. And the faster the economy, the innovation, and all of that will not only slow to a stop, it will begin to implode, bringing the culture with it. Anyway, that's something I wanted to kind of pitch out there for people who are falling into the tropes that sometimes get taken too far. You know, we accept certain things as common sense, and I try to remind people as much as possible there's nothing common about sense. So, yeah, keep that in mind. I hope you guys are doing okay, and if you've got questions, comments, or just you want to talk about your own work, put it in the comments below. All right, cheers.